So the Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. This is the book, and it's a lovely book. I don't know if you guys have had a chance, if you want to read it, but it's well worth getting if you want, and it's not that expensive. So that's what we're basing our study on. And this study addresses how good questions lead to good decisions. Andy Stanley is sorry, I have a little information about him. He is a pastor. Let's see, where did I put his information? He's a pastor in Atlanta, well, I guess I forgot his information. That's not good. From what I remember, so he is a pastor in Atlanta, and he has done several books about leadership, and he does global leadership training on local leadership training. And Bill, do you know what the foundation is? I'm forgetting what he has a First Missions or something like that. Do you know?
I don't remember the name of it, but I do know that he is a very internationally famous speaker, and he is one of the most popular video teachers that we have these days. And he grew this church from very small to one of those mega churches. So he's quite interesting to young people and to young adults. I guess his reputation centers around his dynamic leadership related to marriage, family, and handling life's daily problems.
Okay. And I found a little bit more. He founded the Atlanta-based North Point Ministries, and which consists of 7 churches in the Atlanta area. And his father is Cheryle Stanley, who was a pastor at First Baptist in Atlanta for 49 years. And he founded Total Heart Ministries, I think it is, which also has had a lot of profound leadership training and influence over folks. So he's a very good speaker. And he will focus on 5 big questions on how to help us frame our decision-making processes, especially those that are emotionally charged and hard. He feels like the key point is training yourself to be very honest with yourself, and how you go through that decision-making process of being honest, hard as it is, but a lot of us don't tend to think about that kind of structure or focus when we're making a decision. Probably some of us that are more wiser and self-disciplined at this point in life have developed that kind of grid to think about and discern how to make a decision. But he offers this to help us embrace the hardness of it, and also to kind of structure our thoughts and go to something when we are making a hard, difficult decision. So that's why it's a pretty profound way to structure our lassoing our decision-making process. For somebody like me that can feel strongly both ways, get a little confused, I'm kind of a people pleaser, this was very helpful, because that kind of structure, if it's difficult, and I know it's going to have a lot of implications on people I care about, or not even realizing the legacy of my decision and the ripple effect. This helps me think about how to give it a minute, not be impulsive with my thoughts, and then go through and discern the components. So there's 5 areas that he thinks go into making healthy decisions, and each week we'll cover those. And today it's the integrity question. Am I being honest with myself? Which is hard because it's easy to self-deceive. The second question next week that Jim's going to take up is the legacy question. What story do I want to tell about my life, about my legacy? The third is your conscious question. Is there a tension in my life that deserves my attention in my decision making? And then the next week is maturity question. What is the wise thing to do? Wisdom. That's hard to come by, isn't it? And then the last one is the relationship question. What does love require of me? So we'll start off with the introduction in the first session, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Here we go.
Well, hi there, everybody. I'm Andy Stanley, and I'm so honored you've invited me to be a part of your group for the next few weeks, the next few days, or if you're a binge watcher, maybe just the next few hours. Whatever the case, thank you. And on behalf of the folks closest to you, the folks who depend on you, thanks for setting aside some time to discuss a topic that intersects and influences the direction of your life, and consequently influences the direction of their life as well, every single day. In fact, multiple times a day. Namely, we're talking about decision making. Your decisions have and will continue to determine the direction and the quality of your life. And that's not motivation enough to get this right. Your decision determines the direction and quality of other people's lives as well. So let's jump in. And I can't think of a better way to begin our time together than with a story about one of my favorite people and perhaps one of your favorite people as well, my dad. When I was a kid, my dad had a terrible habit. At least I thought it was a terrible habit. He wouldn't tell me what to do. Specifically, he wouldn't tell me what to do when I didn't know what to do. And I wanted him to tell me what he thought I should do. Now, I know most kids don't want their parents telling them what to do. And I was like most kids most of the time. But on occasion, I wanted him to tell me what to do. And he would. Worse, instead of answering my questions, he would ask me questions. And his go-to question was this. He would say, Andy, what are you going to do when I'm not around to tell you what to do? It would just drive me crazy. And my go-to response to his go-to question is, Dad, but you are around, so tell me. Now, of course, my dad's go-to question wasn't his only question. During middle school and high school, his arsenal of questions included one of the 5 questions that we're going to explore later. He would say, Andy, what is the wise thing to do? What is the wise thing to do? Now, as a teenager, that question usually eliminated most of my preferred options. But even when I took it seriously, it eliminated a lot of unnecessary regret as well. Now, what I didn't appreciate then, that I most certainly appreciate now, was why. Why all the questions? Why not just tell me what to do? And you can probably guess the answer to that question, right? He was more interested in teaching me how to make decisions than he was in making decisions for me. Now, granted, he started early, and maybe he started too early, but to his credit and to my advantage, he started while the stakes were low. Because as a kid, right, not very much hung in the balance of my decisions. But he knew that that would change with time. And he wanted me to be ready. And here's the funny thing. I've actually employed this same strategy with my kids, or at least I've tried to anyway. Who knows, maybe one day they'll write a book about it. Now, unbeknownst to my dad, he was actually teaching me something else as well. And that something else is actually the point of our time together. By opting for questions over direction, my dad connected 2 very important dots for me. In fact, I think these are dots most adults never connect. He helped me make the connection between good questions and good decisions. Good questions and good decisions. To tease that out a bit, he helped me make the connection between well-placed, appropriately timed, thought-provoking questions and good decision-making. Or simply put, good questions lead to better decisions. And better decisions always lead to fewer regrets. This is why on the backside of a bad decision, it's not unusual to hear someone say something like, I should have asked more questions. And why do they say that? Because, well, we know intuitively that the more questions we ask, the more information we have, which leads to greater insight and hopefully better decisions. But pausing to ponder a list of potentially disruptive questions is not easy, and it's certainly not intuitive. In fact, the truth is, let's be honest, most of us resist uninvited questions when we're making a decision, right? In fact, in the moment, we feel like we're being questioned rather than simply being asked a question. And there's a big difference between the two. And when we confuse one for the other, our defenses go up and our learning aptitude goes down. In fact, it is virtually impossible, you know this, it is virtually impossible to welcome new information and insight when we're convinced that, somebody's questioning our judgment. And this is especially true when we're making personal decisions. After all, they're personal. Translated, it's nobody's business. But let's be honest, and we're going to come back to this. You've never made a personal decision that didn't become somebody's business, right? In fact, every decision we make impacts somebody, and it's usually the folks closest to us. And there's no getting around this. There's no getting around the fact that well-placed, appropriately timed, thought-provoking questions result in better decisions and fewer regrets. Now, I'll tell you who gets this. A good counselor gets this. If you've ever been in counseling, you've experienced this. Good counselors understand that we're far more inclined to follow through on decisions we make rather than advice prescribed to us by other people, right? So counselors, you know what counselors do? They scatter breadcrumbs along our path to lead us toward making our own good decisions. And what are those breadcrumbs? You guessed it. They're well-placed, appropriately timed, thought-provoking questions. So, what if you knew the questions ahead of time? What if you had a list of questions that you could ask yourself when faced with an important decision? Imagine the money you would save by avoiding all those trips to the counselor, right? I'm kidding. Sort of. I mean, seriously, imagine having a list of questions that serve as the grid or the filter by which to evaluate your options every time you're making a decision. And if the idea of a decision-making grid sounds odd to you, it shouldn't, because you already have one. In fact, you use it every day. You just aren't aware of it. But every time you make a decision, you unconsciously ask a series of questions. Questions like, will this make me happy? Will I enjoy this? Will this hurt anybody? Will anybody find out? Now, while some of the questions that we intuitively ask ourselves are helpful, others really aren't, especially those first two questions, right? In fact, those first two questions are essential ingredients in the recipe of regret. So my purpose in this study is to give you the questions ahead of time, not all the questions, but 5 questions I'm absolutely convinced will result in better decisions and fewer regrets. Essentially, I want you to add 5 questions to your existing arsenal of questions, 5 questions to ask every single time you make a decision of any consequence. And these questions are so simple that when you see the list, you may wonder if you even need to finish this study. And of course, that's up to you. But before you go looking for your receipt, I want you to consider this. There is no necessary correlation. There is no necessary correlation between knowing and doing. None. Now, there should be, but there isn't. Knowing the questions to ask and actually pausing to ask the questions are 2 completely different things. And although we've never met, I can promise you this. Developing the discipline to pause and ask these 5 questions will result in better decisions, and it will result in fewer regrets. So I hope you'll finish this study, because if you do, these 5 questions will begin to inform your conscience, and in that way become a permanent feature in the decision-making process for you. So here they are. Question number 1, the integrity question. Am I being honest with myself, really? Number 2, the legacy question. What story do I want to tell? Number 3, the conscience question. Is there attention that deserves my attention? Number 4, the maturity question. What is the wise thing to do? And number 5, the relationship question. What does love require of me? Now, in sessions 2 through 6, we're going to unpack each of the 5 questions. But for the remainder of this session, I want to highlight one really important but easy to miss relationship between your decisions and your future. Now, it goes without saying, and I don't want to insult your intelligence, but I need to say it anyway. You are where you are because of the decisions you've made, right? Now, you may push back a bit because, it's not that simple. It wasn't just your decisions that landed you where you are today, and I get that. We're going to talk about that. But for the most part, you are where you are because of decisions that you've made. But here's the corollary. that's just as obvious, but for whatever reason, we overlook it as well. Your future will be determined by your decisions as well. Your decisions, along with your responses to other people's decisions, which are also your decisions, are about the only thing you can control in your life. They're about the only thing I can control in my life, right? Which means, don't miss this, your decisions are how you control your life. Decisions are your steering wheel. They're your joystick, your trackpad, which means, and this is big, your decisions determine your story, the story of your life. And every single decision becomes a permanent part of that story, which means we would be wise to stop at every decision-making junction and consider the story that we want to tell. But perhaps even more compelling, we should consider what story we want told about us, right? And the good news is this: you get to decide. But you decide one decision at a time, because you write the story one decision at a time. Now, to repeat something I stated earlier, your decisions determine the direction and the quality of your life. Your decisions have shaped the direction and the quality of your life so far, for good or maybe not so good. Again, you are where you are for the most part because of decisions you've made. So yeah, it's your fault. And I thought we should just get that out of the way up front, but it's not all bad news. Regret and disappointment aren't the only things spilling out of your decision pipeline. Your greatest joys, your greatest accomplishments are as well. But the moral of the story is simply this: that regardless of how things are going or have gone, you are responsible. You are responsible for you. You wrote the story so far. And here's the good news: you get to write the next several chapters as well. And these 5 questions are designed to help you write a good one, perhaps a great one, which leads me to this. If you're like most people, you'd like to go back and unmake a few decisions from the past, right? Decisions that led to chapters of your life you wish you could go back and unlive, relive. Chapters you'd like to rewrite. And perhaps you emerge from that not so glorious season of life committed to making better decisions in the future. And perhaps you have. But oddly enough, most people don't. And here's why. Most people don't learn from bad decisions because they're convinced their bad decisions were somebody else's fault. So as long as they stay away from somebody else, no change is required on their part. You've seen that. Perhaps you've lived that. And my hope is this: that these 5 questions change that for you. After all, nobody plans to complicate their life with a decision. The problem is, and what moved me to share this content is this: far too many people don't plan not to. They don't plan not to complicate their lives with unnecessary, avoidable bad decisions. They don't put simple safeguards in place to ensure a more happily ever after. And here's the thing: these 5 questions are your safeguards. And we all need safeguards, which sounds a little bit bold for me to say considering we've never met. But here's what I know about you: you may not be good at selling anything to anybody else, but when it comes to selling yourself on a bad idea, you are masterclass, right? Me too. Our greatest regrets are always associated with things or opportunities or people that we sold ourselves on, right? I mean, think back to your last bad relationship decision. Seemed right at the time. You were in love, or you were in lust, or you were in something, and whatever it was, you were in it. And your mama tried to warn you, and your best friend tried to warn you, but you assured them that you knew what you were doing. And, at the time, you were sure that you knew what you were doing. Looking back, you think, what was I doing? I should have known better. I should have listened. But instead of listening, you were selling. You were selling who? You were selling yourself. This is true for this last bad purchasing decision you made as well, right? I mean, once you had your heart set on it, whatever it was, it was over. It was like something took over. It's like the next thing you knew, you're handing your credit card to someone you don't even know to buy something you don't need and perhaps you can't or shouldn't afford. And why? Because you sold yourself. Turns out, no offense, you're a sucker for you. We'll explore this again, this very odd dynamic in more depth later. But in case later never comes, here's the thing. I'll go ahead and say it. As soon as you start selling you on anything, you should hit the pause button. As soon as you catch yourself selling you on something to you, you should hit the pause button. And here's why. Don't miss this. We rarely have to sell ourselves on a good idea, right? We just know, don't. So Your future decisions will determine the direction and the quality of your life. And here's the scary part. We don't know who or what hangs in the balance of those decisions. So we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to others, maybe especially others, to consider the potential long-term outcomes of our decisions. After all, it takes a lifetime for the outcome of some decisions to play out, right? In some cases, it takes generations. In fact, in the book, I give 2 examples from history, but right now, I want you to think about your history. Think about how different, think about this. Think about how different your life would be if your parents or your grandparents had decided differently about a few key things. Your parents and grandparents made some, well, what seemed to them to be small, insignificant decisions that determined the trajectory of your life. They weren't thinking about you at the time. In fact, you weren't even around to be thought about. But you've been impacted by their decisions for better or for worse. Again, we never know. We never know what or who hangs in the balance of the decisions that we make. But what we do know is this: private decisions have public outcomes. Your private decisions probably will not stay private, and your personal decisions, they're going to impact some other persons. Now, I know you want to get this right. I know you want to write a story worth telling, and I'm convinced you can. And these 5 questions, when asked consistently, will ensure your fingerprints on the future will be fingerprints worth celebrating. That's it for me. Next time, we'll dive into the first of our 5 questions, the integrity question. And now it is your turn to talk. Enjoy the discussion.
We're gonna get going?
Yeah.
Okay,
Then you'll queue up.
we'll have to find out.
Okay.
It
So
should,
have you all decided to decide? Yeah.
gotta go now, okay.
Who gets that?
Well, maybe not.
Oh, it's please. And over here. Oh, who's blinking? I don't know. Shall I start talking just in case?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I gotta go queue it up.
Okay. There's a story that he tells in this book, but he, can they hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
One of the people he uses as an example, well, 2 people, about decisions having long lasting effects. One was Jeremiah with King, I can't ever pronounce his name, Jehoiakim. I guess that's a start. So he's one of the kings. He's a young king in Judea, and Jeremiah's trying to tell him because Nebuchadnezzar, letting Judah have a little bit of rain, but he doesn't let him go too far. And Jehoiakim decides, with his pride and his self-interest, that they're going to defy Nebuchadnezzar, and they're going to give their allegiance to Egypt. Well, from that point on, Jeremiah tries to tell him that's not a good idea. They're going to, beat us up, take away our freedom. And the king decides to ignore him. And a long succession of kings that come after do the same thing with their pride and their kingship. Jeremiah, you know how heartbroken he was, his lamentations, and how he tried to influence the kings. But he makes a point of talking about how kings basically get to make their own decisions, and they don't really maybe not care what other people think. And if you think about history of our kings and what God told us about our need for kings, and here we are today, and our presidents, our royals, our movie stars, and just think about that a little bit, that the implication of that story. Another story he gave was about George Washington when he was trying to decide his personal decision about which way to go. Several people were trying to encourage him to be a king, not the idea of president. And think about what would happen to our country if kingdom was the route we went. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay, off we go.
Here we go again.
Sorry, it's
I think I'm very complimenting, didn't I?
it's gonna happen.
It's just gonna happen.
It's okay. It's all good.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a thought-provoking discussion following our first session, and hopefully you had a chance to do some preparation for this session. So let's jump in, and let's jump in with a really uncomfortable thought. The easiest person to deceive, is the person in the mirror. Now, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And we're going to talk about why in just a minute. But for the moment, I want you to let that sink in. Actually, allow me to rub it in. You have talked yourself into, you have deceived yourself into, you have sold yourself on every bad decision you've ever made. You were there for all of them. You have done more to undermine your own success and progress than anyone else on the planet. Now, granted, there were outside pressures. There were other voices involved, people promising you stuff, right? But in the end, you decided. And the reason I know so much about you is I know so much about me. I'm equally guilty. So what's wrong with us? I mean, self-leadership, again, it shouldn't be this way, but self-leadership is the greatest leadership challenge that any of us will ever face. And we'll never be leaders worth following if we don't lead ourselves well. If you have children, you know that your self-leadership is impacting some other selves, right? I mean, consider this. Whether or not you want to be like your parents depends upon what they required of themselves, not what they required of you. The way they led themselves determined how you view themselves, right? And the way we lead ourselves will determine whether or not our children want to be like us or even with us. So this is a really big deal. But here's the challenge, and this will set us up for the first of our 5 questions. You can't lead yourself if you're lying to yourself. You can't lead yourself well if you're lying to yourself. Have you ever tried to lead a liar? It's pretty much impossible, right? In fact, in professional settings, what do? In professional settings, you fire a liar. So in this session, I'm going to challenge you to fire the dishonest version of you and hire a new you, an honest you, a you that will always tell you the truth, even when it makes you feel bad about you. Besides, if you lie to yourself, you'll eventually lie to somebody else. In fact, you may hate me for saying this. If you have a hard time telling other people the truth when the truth makes you look bad, you're probably not being honest with yourself either. As you know, dishonesty erodes credibility. And in a similar way, when we are dishonest with ourselves, it erodes credibility within ourselves, which sounds strange, I know, but think about it. When we lie out loud to somebody else, what's the first thing we do on the inside? What's the first thing we do in our heads? We justify the lie. To who? To ourselves. We have to. Otherwise, we're at odds with ourselves, something us sane people can't maintain for very long. So what do? We create a narrative that justifies our lie or our half-truth, and then we choose to believe it. It's crazy. And why would we believe in a narrative that we created? Well, we answered that in session 1. You're a sucker for you. You can convince yourself of just about anything, and so can I. Author and professor Erin Brown defines a false narrative as this, and this is so helpful. She says it's a plastic truth, She goes on to say this, what we've said so many times in our heads, it ultimately becomes a plastic truth. And over time, it takes the parts and the pieces that we've kind of made up and brought together, and we cement it in the gaps between what we know to be true, and before long, we have a brand new narrative that has nothing to do with what's actually true. False narratives become our crutch. So, got any false narratives that you carry around? Any plastic truths? As my AA and my NA friends remind me, rigorous honesty is the first rule to recovery. So tell yourself the truth even if it makes you feel bad about yourself, because you cannot make the best decision for you until you're honest with you. Besides, if you're not honest about why you're choosing what you're choosing or doing what you're doing, you're going to have a difficult time taking responsibility for the outcome of those decisions as well, right? And as you know, she did for people who refuse to take responsibility for their decisions. We call it irresponsible. And when we're dishonest with ourselves, we have a hard time owning up to the outcome of our decisions. And this creates a vicious downward spiral that leaves people broken and confused. So do you want to be broken and confused? Of course you don't. So come on, root out your false, plastic, mostly true, self-centered narratives and kiss them goodbye. Well, you probably don't want to kiss them. Anyway, the fact that everything I've said so far is obvious doesn't make it easy, does it? In fact, your first step may be being honest with yourself about the fact that you're not always honest with yourself. But to decide your way into a better future, you've got to develop the uncomfortable habit of telling yourself the uncomfortable truth, specifically the uncomfortable truth about why you're choosing to do what you're choosing to do. And this leads us at last to our first of 5 questions, the integrity question. And the integrity question is this: am I being honest with myself? Am I being honest with myself? You may not owe it to anyone else, but you owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself about why you choose what you choose, why you decide what you decide. There's no win. There is no win in selling yourself. Just tell yourself the truth. In fact, I found it helps a lot to ask this question twice, but on the second round, it helps to add a word. Am I being honest with myself? Really? Am I being honest with myself? Really? Why am I doing this? Really? Why am I avoiding him? Really? Why am I postponing this? Really? Seriously, why are you postponing this? Why do I keep making the same excuses? Really? Why am I going? Really? Why did I say yes? Why did I choose to wear this? Really? Why did I choose to purchase or lease this? Really? Really? Why did you choose to purchase or lease this? Why do I drive this? Really? Why did I order this? Really? Why did I move in? Why did I move out? Really? Remember this. When it comes to selling ourselves on a bad idea, we are the best. When it comes to building and arguing a case for why we should do something we know we shouldn't do, we are unassailable litigators, right? So let's stop with all that. Just tell yourself the unfiltered, perhaps embarrassing truth. It may hurt. You may hurt your own feelings, but in the end, it's going to help. Owning the real why behind the what may cause some lights to come on, and lights are terrifying. Just ask the roaches and the rats, right? But light is also a disinfectant. Truth is as well. They go hand in hand. So bring your narratives, your justifications, and your excuses into the light. Now, as you know, we come into the world with a natural proclivity for selling ourselves on what we want to do rather than what we ought to do. And here's sort of how that works. Once our hearts get wrapped around something, or once our hearts get wrapped around somebody, the heart sends a message to the brain. And the heart says to the brain, hey, brain, I want this. So go figure out a way for me to get it, and go figure out a way for me to justify getting it. Now, our brains are really smart. That's what I would call a brain, right? And our brains know that while it's difficult to justify a want, it is not so difficult to justify a need. So the first thing your brain does, the first thing my brain does, is upgrade the message to something far more sophisticated than something I want. Your brain says, you need this. And once we're convinced we need something, it's pretty much game over. Before long, we have a list of justifications for buying it, drinking it, staying, leaving, asking it out, asking it in, or whatever. But the reasons we use to sell ourselves, aren't actually reasons. They're just justification. And justifying is akin to just lying. We are just lying to ourselves. And in most instances, we know it. Now, There's a verse in the Old Testament that pretty much summarizes everything I've said, but a whole lot better than how I said it. But to appreciate the weight of this ancient wisdom, you got to know a little bit about the context. So here's the context. Around 600 BC, Jeremiah, a Jewish court advisor turned prophet, served as an advisor to actually a series of kings in ancient Israel. Kings whose careers would have been way smoother and a lot longer if they had taken Jeremiah's advice. But of course, the point of being a king is you don't have to listen to anyone's advice. So during an interaction with one particularly stubborn king, King Zedekiah, who as it turns out was actually Israel's last king, Jeremiah documents his explanation as to why he thinks we're so prone towards self-deception. And of course, he learned this from watching these kings make terrible, terrible decisions. He explains why we're so good at selling ourselves on bad options. And here's what Jeremiah wrote all those years ago. He wrote, "The heart is deceitful above all things." The heart is deceitful above all things. The heart is in every heart, your heart, my heart. The heart is deceitful. Now, Jeremiah chose his adjective very carefully. As you know, there's a big difference between being dishonest and being deceitful. Dishonest is way easier to spot than deceitful, right? I mean, dishonest is just straight up not honest, but deceitful usually includes a mix of truth, half-truth, and untruth. If our hearts were just straight up dishonest, if our hearts just lied to us, that would be easy to detect. But deceitful is difficult to detect. You've met dishonest people who weren't shrewd enough to deceive you. I mean, their dishonesty was apparent, right? But deceitful people, those are the dangerous ones. So Jeremiah chose his words carefully. Our hearts are deceitful. They're dangerous. It's why we're so convinced, and at times it's why we're so convincing. We don't merely lie to ourselves, we deceive ourselves. But Jeremiah wasn't finished. He goes on to say this: the heart is deceitful above all things, and it is beyond cure. There's no cure. This is a permanent condition. You don't outgrow it, you don't outmature it, and you can't fix it. It's hardwired. We're doomed. Okay, so we're not doomed, but it is a permanent condition which requires constant supervision. A permanent condition requires proactive response. Otherwise, we'll just deceive ourselves. But Jeremiah's still not finished. He wraps up by stating something we've all experienced. He says this: the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? And that's a good question. I certainly don't. Apparently, according to Jeremiah, nobody does, which explains a lot of things. It explains why we've all said at some point, I don't understand why I did what I just did, which is another way of saying, I don't understand why I decided what I just decided. I don't understand why I chose what I just chose. It's why we do things that make perfect sense in the moment that make utterly no sense a moment later. It explains why you do the very thing you tell other people not to do. It's why the person in the mirror is the most difficult person to lead. They just won't tell you the truth unless you force them to. You've got to pin them down, you've got to look them in the eye, and you've got to ask them, why are you doing this really? And the sooner you embrace this uncomfortable, disquieting fact about yourself, the sooner you'll develop and maintain a healthy suspicion about yourself. And the more open you'll be to information and advice that conflicts with, well, where your heart has a tendency to take you. The more cautious you'll be when the salesman inside of you starts selling. So this week, I want you to have a heart-to-heart with yourself and have it in the mirror. Look yourself in the eye. Seriously, stand in front of the mirror, look yourself in the eye, and say out loud and use your name, Andy, are you being honest with yourself? Really? And then tell yourself the truth. Tell yourself the truth even if you don't plan to act on it. You owe it to yourself to know, even if it points you in a direction that you don't intend to go. It's not going to hurt to know. And be curious. This is so important. To help punch through our deceptive selves requires what Brene Brown refers to as emotional curiosity. And this is so important. When we push through our discomfort, and get curious about why we're feeling what we're feeling, why we are determined to do what we're hell-bent on doing, when we finally get to the truth, something happens on the inside. But most people won't do this. So don't be most people. Curiosity will keep you focused on the frontiers of your ignorance. And that's where we learn. That's where we gain insight. And when it's uncomfortable, when you're tempted to turn away and run, that's fear talking. That's insecurity talking. So be curious. If you do, you'll learn something, and you'll learn something about yourself. And in the end, you will make better decisions and you will experience fewer regrets. It will probably come as no surprise that Jesus made a powerful statement in this regard as well. You're actually familiar with this statement, not because Jesus said it, but because politicians quote him all the time. They've been hijacking this statement for decades, of course, without giving Jesus any credit. But here's what Jesus said. He said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Truth really will set you free. But the opposite is true as well. Dishonesty will imprison you. And if we're not careful, we imprison ourselves when we're less than honest with ourselves. Telling yourself the truth brings clarity. You'll see better. It'll be harder to deceive yourself. Telling yourself the truth will empower you to make better decisions, the right decision, and thus the first of our 5 questions. Am I being honest? Am I being honest with myself? Really? Am I telling myself the truth? Or am I selling myself a regret? Now, as we close, I want to ask you a series of questions. Most of these won't have anything to do with your current situation, but perhaps a couple of them. And these are the kinds of questions we should all get in the habit of asking ourselves. Now, here's the thing. Nobody can read your mind. So when I get to a question that does intersect with your current reality, there is no reason for you not to be honest with yourself. In fact, I'll even give you an out. You don't have to do anything with your answer. Just be honest with yourself, really. Okay, ready? Here we go. Why are you moving? Really? Why do you continue to go out with him? Really? Why do you continue to go out with her? Really? Why did you file for divorce? Really? Why did you move in? Why are you leaving? Why are you taking that job? Really? What's the real reason you don't call your kids? What's the actual reason you don't call your mom? What's the real reason you don't call your dad, your brother, your sister? It's brutal, isn't it? It's terrifying. It's clarifying. Hopefully, it's liberating and it's empowering. And to help you adopt our first question as part of your decision-making filter, I want to encourage you to make a decision right now. Now, so you know, I'm going to conclude each session by asking you to make a decision, but this is the first one. And this first one may be the most important one, and perhaps it will be the most difficult decision to keep. But here's the decision I want to challenge you to make right now. We call it the integrity decision. I will not lie to myself, even when the truth makes me feel bad about myself. I want you to decide right now, I will not lie to myself, even when the truth makes me feel bad about myself. And here's why. There are worse things than feeling bad about yourself. For starters, clinging to something bad about yourself. Refusing to address what's bad about ourselves is bad for ourselves. So, are you ready to be honest with yourself, even if it makes you feel bad about yourself? You will never get to where you need to be until you acknowledge where you are to begin with. So be honest. After all, Jeremiah was right, wasn't he? The heart is deceitful above all things, and it is beyond cure. It cannot be cured. But now you know. And now you know what to do about it. And now you are better equipped to make better decisions and to live with fewer regrets, which is a good thing because your decisions determine the direction and quality of your life, as well as the direction and quality of the lives of the people that you'll love. We'll pick up the discussion right there next time in session 3, where we will unpack the legacy question. But now it's your turn to talk. Have a great discussion.
Pretty decisive, huh?
Very good.
It is good. I'm just going to make a couple of points that he made in the book to further highlight what he was talking about, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion. The idea of self-leadership and when we're not honest with ourselves and that dissonance it sets up inside of ourselves. The point of developing that strength or that characteristic, our stamina for truth, is really is one of the most important, hardest things there is to do. In conflict, the stakes get high. You know, why we choose to take exception with somebody, why we decide, like you said, all the questions, all the decisions we make, the harder decisions, the ones that are emotionally impact, the ones where we've sold ourselves. I don't know about you all, but I'm guilty of that. And what was leading me at the time to self-sell myself, that getting down to the honesty of why I did it, I would have loved in points of maturity to have these hard questions to think about, to organize myself around. I don't know if you all have had decisions in your past where having that guidance, we have the Bible's wisdom, we have our parents' wisdom, we have our church's wisdom. But when we go home and look at ourselves and talk to ourselves, that's where it's important to have that internal structure too. One of the things he talks about in the book is confirmation bias, where our brains are wired to conserve its energy, to reinforce itself with the information it's put in there. And there's a part of your brain, well, several parts, but it's called confirmation bias. And it's what the world tries to also sell us on. And I'll just read you the definition of it. And everybody has this propensity. So it's the human tendency to look for information that supports what we already believe or want to do. It empowers us to see what we want and tune out everything else to the contrary. And we all think we're objective to weed that out, but we do have a propensity to self-reinforce ourselves. But wouldn't it be horrible? I think Satan wants us to think this is happening. But if every time we made a mistake, the whole world knew about it, it was broadcasted like, oh my goodness, shame times a million. But what would happen if I think our world is kind of structured that way, you know, television, social media, friends. Sometimes people will remind you of your mistakes. And so I think a lot of us want to make sure that we fortified ourselves with our decision. This is a hard thing to do. Is there anything in our world today that you can think of that personifies confirmation bias?
Well,
Politics?
you know,
My first thought.
well, I think though that it's really anything. I'm sure it can be something like politics, but even who your favorite sports team is, anything that you have a strong opinion about, if you love to talk to somebody that also agrees with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I know most of the examples we think about have to do with people trying to manipulate their mind in the world of politics, but it's powerful beyond.
Advertising really goes on that point. Like they try, you know, they work real hard to reinforce that you like something. And we don't even know we're being sold on it.
That needs something, you know?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the commercials on all the medications throughout the day. There's a pill for everything. And at the very bottom, they run through all the side effects, but you know, they run through them so fast. You know, they're so busy selling you all the scenes of the mountains and the friends on the beach and how this drug is gonna help you get back to the beach and you're gonna look great, you're gonna lose weight, you know. Meanwhile, all the side effects are scrolling at the bottom, you know, and they're just trying to help you confirm if this is the right thing for you.
You too could be perfect.
Yeah, you too could be perfect. You could just like that person, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's almost a design criteria for online advertising in that as soon as you start saying, tell me about a Lexus car, you know, what are the good things about a Lexus car? immediately you'll start getting all these advertisements, or
Feed that.
tell me about,
Yeah.
tell me about the great places to go for travel. Immediately, you're gonna start getting all these things at politics, if you start moving this direction, the articles that you read in the news and everything online will support what you're looking for. And that's, I think, the way they design it.
And they say AI, if you ask it to help you organize a speech or anything, or like help you weed through your thoughts about something, it reinforces, it gets an idea, it's programmed to get your idea of where you're going from and reinforce that idea and fortify it. And that's what I think a lot of trying to safeguard AI is to recognize when you're being kind of reinforced for going down a rabbit hole.
Bill has a question.
Bill has a
We have the thought.
Yes, sir.
One thing that I like about Stanley's this particular session was the word really.
Yeah.
Because I think being honest with yourself, oftentimes, if you ask the question, what's motivating me, you can easily give that already justified list, probably 10 things. But when he says, now, really, what is your motivation? I mean, that's the thing that hits me. I remember when I was a pastor of the first church, I was a young guy, and, the church had fights and all this stuff, and the attendance was way down. So my goal was to grow the church, to get more people to show up. I think we all want that for our church. So I made a plan, and to simplify it, my plan was to give a Shetland pony to the child who brought the most other children and brought the most parents to the church, because I figured if they got them there, we could convince them to join. So we had the largest number of people that church had ever seen, and the little girl that got them there, I made a big deal out of it. They had the newspaper in our little bitty town. They had all the people come out to show her getting her Shetland pony. Well, after it's all over, her mother came to see me and said, we don't want any Shetland pony. We don't have a place to keep a Shetland pony. Our daughter doesn't need a Shetland pony. And the deacons came to me and said, what in the world were you thinking? It makes us look like a circus. And you can remember, I got all this other stuff piled on me. And then as I sat back and thought about it, what was my motivation? I said it was to grow a church. But when you throw that word in, really, what was your real motivation? And I got to thinking about it. I guess it was the Spirit of God. It wasn't me. The real motivation is I wanted to look good. And it really hurt, but it really helped me for the rest of my ministry. Don't put on a show to make you look good. So I think that's a question that's really good. Whenever I ask people in the future, why are you marrying this girl? Why are you marrying that guy? Really? Why are you making this decision? I think that was a I don't know what the rest of you think, but I think that was a powerful, powerful point that Andy was making.
That really clarifying is where the real honesty is, because when you have to dig down, like if you think about what's influencing you, why do I really want that? Or take it one step more emotional charge when you get into a conflict with a loved one. What's going on? And there's usually a lot of two sides, the really, and where people are drawing the lines, it's the really that we have to be honest with ourselves. And the justification and the fortifying ourselves really kicks in. Stanley, he'd said, asking yourself the what and the why. So, you label the what and then the why. So if, let's say I realize I'm being influenced, I'm a people pleaser and I don't want conflict. And why will I not be truthful and stand up, even if I make somebody mad? And if I really get down into that hard thing, it's because I'm frightened. I want people to not judge me. And but who is my king? Who is my guide? Where's the discernment? What's the really hard thing to do? How far do we really go with that? Because that influence, that person we care about, all those things that are idols really get to influence us. We want to be successful. So, and one of the things that he says is that the categories where those really most likely need to be thought of in the area of purchases, relationships, and habits. So, you know, and just to add a few more, but those reallys are those justifications or those narratives. Why am I doing this? That question again. Why am I postponing this? Why did I say yes? Why did I purchase that? You guys can think of some maybe other questions that are hard questions. Anybody, any other questions?
I think when I get angry, if I really analyze while I'm angry, it has little to do with the information that's flowing to me. You know, obviously, there's been something in my past that I have established a big value on, and instead of examining that and say, "Here, I'm really angry," well, that's not. I'd rather argue back with whatever made me angry rather than own up to the fact that the only reason I'm angry is because you hit a soft spot somewhere.
Sure, absolutely.
What's that saying? You besmirch my discussions. It's like we all have that. Yeah, that place where it's about our righteousness. Conflict's hard like that. Just for the sake of time, thank you. So safeguards, our guidance. How do we help with this difficult process? He mentioned a few of them. Admitting, being suspect of our self-rightness when we're biasing ourselves, not being too impulsive with our decisions, asking ourselves that honest, hard conversation we have with ourselves, being curious, being a student versus a critic. He mentioned that promise commitment to ourselves that I will be honest with myself. I'll develop that stamina, that courage. And a lot of times that happens privately and where in prayer, asking for God's help. Anybody else have any other ideas about how we fortify ourselves against ourselves?
You know, for me, my safeguard is my wife. Because we are completely opposite when it comes to like purchase stuff type of stuff. For years, y'all heard me about, I want to do TV. And she's like, why?
Because I
She
need
really
it.
could just say, really? Really?
Do you need that?
Yeah, you know, and don't really need a new TV, okay? I mean, what we have is fine. Okay, it's 5 or 6 years old, so I think that's good enough reason. Okay, you know, and it's not. So I haven't got a new TV, okay? So, you know, I think it's important to have somebody around you in those safeguards that's gonna say, okay, well, hang on a second. You know, and as we know, there is not the money, right? Because this TV we bought, 50-inch TV is bigger than I could use. It was, what was it, 235 less or 240? So, you know, I think it's important to have somebody around you when you take a step back, you pause. You know, Bill has been that way for many of us over the years, right? Well, let me call Bill and see what he thinks. And Bill has told me things that I didn't want to hear. You know, but they were honest. He's my friend. And I know they came from a good place, a good heart. And it wasn't to hurt me or wasn't to, you know, throw me down in a ditch or anything. It was just to help me think through things. And Bill's great. Bill's great asking you questions. If y'all have ever consulted Bill on something, be careful. He's gonna ask you some hard questions.
Probing questions.
Probing questions, you know. And I'm like, okay, Bill, I'm sure I called you for a reason. Oh, here comes Phyllis. Well, let Phyllis jump in. Phyllis has more experience with Bill than I do, honestly.
A little bit, Ralph. Brother, did you set the stage for me? Because I got a burning question. I really enjoyed this session this morning. I think it's got a lot of things, and I made myself a lot of notes to think about and talk to Bill about later this week. However, I'm struggling a bit. And I've always struggled with this question because as Christians, we talk a lot about self-denial. And when we come to a session like this, and it's all about examine yourself, examine your motives, examine your thinking. And I love this phrase, curiosity keeps me on the frontier of my ignorance. That's a great line. But I struggle with trying to incorporate those things into my life. And at the same time, self-denial, because most of the time when I come to having to make a decision, I don't too much consider myself because I've been taught or programmed not to. It's about how is this going to affect somebody else? So bottom line is I'm struggling with all this inner self-evaluating, self when we're taught as Christians to deny ourselves. So have at it, brothers. Maybe you'll come up with a good answer for me.
I defer to the wisdom in the room.
Here, don't say that. And I was thinking at the same time that we know this.
Yeah.
And so instead of a pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and ask these questions, if you think of trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge him. So you've got the perfect counselor that we all know, because we buy into that, because it's through experience that has proven true of us, true for us. And so it's a lot of I guess secular things being said, but the scriptures are powerful and powerful truths for us.
That discernment is hard. And Phyllis, I think too, as he goes through some of the more clarifying points about questions, there's one where you take into account others, your relationship, the impact, and I think he helps us discern that a little bit. And I don't have a great answer, but that would be my answer. Because I know that's a hard one.
Cheryle.
So your answer is just wait.
Yeah.
You just wait.
Okay. We have had some good lessons on waiting, so I will wait.
Fred.
Ralph's mention of Cindy saying why reminded me of a very quick story. Back at USAA, I had software and quality assurance, and we found that oftentimes we'd go out to the business area, quickly gather some of their requirements, come back and develop an application, only to find out that it really didn't meet what they needed. So Roger will remember that we started bringing in a new joint application design methodology to better capture the user's requirements. There are other companies within Texas starting to do the same thing, and we'd host each other every month to share ideas. We went to Dallas, and I think it was Exxon. Anyway, the president of IT came in, actually it was the CEO, I think, came in and just spoke to us a little bit. And he said, one of the reasons that we're better is because I went to Japan and had the opportunity to talk to the CEO of one of their companies who was just doing phenomenal. And he said, as I talked to this guy, the guy told me that anybody that comes before them, he asks 5 questions. And the CEO said, well, would you mind sharing those questions? And he said, sure. He says, I asked, well, why?
Well, in closing, I asked Ginger to read something to reassure us in the Bible with hard. Thank you, Ginger. Ahead.
But Matt will. Psalms 25. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Do not let me be put to shame. Do not let my enemies exalt over me, but not let those who wait for you to be put to shame. Let them be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all day long. Be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and your steadfast love, for they have been from old. Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me for your goodness sakes, O Lord.